Well, thank you so much. Real pleasure to come to West Virginia, except it's a little bit chilly. Gosh, I came from Georgia. My wife's from Australia. She would not be enjoying today right now. I never planned on being a foster parent. It was never something I envisioned. In fact, I believe so many of the myths and the misconceptions that are associated with foster care. First, the kids are bad kids. Second, foster parents are weird people. One of those is true. You've got to be a little bit strange to be a foster parent. It's not a normal lifestyle. So my wife's from Australia. We met a performing group traveling, singing, and dancing across the globe, and got married. And our first child died of a condition called anencephaly, or some pronounce it anencephaly. It's a condition where the brain or skull never truly forms, and my wife was in labor for 92 hours. And I turned my back on a lot of things at the time, including my faith. Years later, we moved back to the U.S., had 3 healthy children, living in rural Georgia, and I started teaching at a rural school, and I noticed a lot of kids coming from my classroom who had issues of attendance, behavior, academics. I kept asking, what's going on? What is going on with these kids? And then I met a lot of their birth parents, and I recognized, it starts in the home. At the same time, I had some students in my classroom who were victims, found out later, of perhaps one of the largest child sex trafficking ring in America, the Nawabian Nation. You should look it up later on, led by Dr. Malachi York in the small rural town of Georgia. And he had over 1,000 children that he brought over the border, sex trafficking. He's now in jail in Colorado, actually, for 135 years. So I asked my wife, hey, I've got these kids in my classroom. What if I start bringing some of them home? And one of my students actually at the time was pregnant with triplets. And I recognized that the father of the kids were in no condition whatsoever to take care of these babies. So I said, what if I brought these babies home? My wife said to me, as long as you change diapers. I wish I had listened to her, because I did diaper change. We had at least one child in our house in diapers for 20 years. So we had 7 in diapers at one point at the same time. Can you imagine that? Should be illegal in all 50 states, I think. So that led to discussion of foster parenting. That led to becoming foster parents and doctorate and all that I do. And I've adopted 3 children from foster care. Can you tell which 3 I've adopted? So this one with this big grin on her face with the colored shirt there, she came to us when she was 5 days old. And in our town of 2,000 people, there's no hospital. There's a little tiny place, but there's no birthing babies. Well, their mother went to the hospital, gave birth. 5 days later, she came to us, weighed 5.2 pounds. I did not plan on adopting her. In fact, I did not want to adopt her. I'll tell you why I didn't want to adopt her. I didn't want to adopt her because I had 3 healthy children. I had lost a child. I recognized the miracle of birth, and I felt if I adopted her, I'd be taking her away from somebody who could not adopt children. My wife, my family, our church community kept telling me, this is your child. I knew that, but I still had some guilt. We adopted her 18 months later. Couldn't be even happier. The one next to her in the pink shirt came to us when she was 18 months old. Mean as a snake. I mean mean as a snake. She knew one word. Shut up. Shut up, shut up, shut up, shut up, shut up. That's all she knew. Her mother was she is 3rd generation foster care. Her mother was in foster care. Her grandparents were in foster care. And her mother was prostituted out in our town, 2,000 people, at age 9, 10 to 12 times a day, 7 days a week. So you can imagine. I want to adopt her. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, that would be 5 kids, and I don't want to be the Brady Bunch. And by the way, when you have up to 11 kids in the house at the same time, we are so far past the Brady Bunch. When we go to church on Sunday, we're like a clown car, because kids just keep coming out of the car, and out of the car, and out of the car. In fact, my wife has given me permission, because since we are past the Brady Bunch, we don't have an Alice. So my wife says, if there's anybody who wants to volunteer to be our Alice, we will pay for your plane ticket back to Atlanta today. Well, she came to us in July of one year. The following April, a caseworker came to us and said, Dr. John, Dr. Kelly, my wife's a doctor of nutrition, Mom's going to have a baby. And I said, oh, no. My wife said, hooray! And they started talking about adoption. Can we adopt the children together? Oh, that's exactly why I'm here, the caseworker said. And I said, no. And so I'm thinking 5 daughters. Can you imagine 5 weddings? Oh. So finally I said, I'm still in the room. I said, no. My wife said, ignore him. He'll change his mind. July of that year, 3 months later, my wife and I had been planning a reunion of people that we had traveled around the globe. We traveled in this performing group called Up With People. Perhaps some of you have heard of it. We had 72 people come from five different continents to spend 5 days with us. Northeast Georgia mountains. We've been planning it for a year. So excited, so excited, so excited. The day is started. I got a phone call. Dr. John, the mom, said to baby, he said, no, put it back in. They can't do that. So 27 hours later, they drove the Northeast Georgia mountains. We didn't sign any paperwork whatsoever. They said, we know where you live. We'll see you in 5 days. Have a good time. And a year later, we were blessed to adopt those two together at the same time. My life has been blessed. So when I go to, in my house, there's no label. There's no foster care. There's no adoptive. There's no biological. They're all my children. And I love these children unconditionally. And every time a child comes to my house, they become part of my family, and I love them unconditionally. That's why so many foster parents struggle with feelings of grief and loss when the child is removed from the home, because it feels like sometimes they're losing part of their family. And also in our house, we don't have any color. We're all the same color, just different shades of God's skin. That's how we are in our house. What color is God's skin? Is it black, brown, yellow, red, or white? Everyone's the same in the good Lord's sight. But recently I was at a grocery store with the three youngest. And by the way, I'm looking at my son there. So when we have a placement call, you know what my son says? Please let it be a boy. Please let it be a boy. I was at a grocery store the other day, and this lady's just staring. She's just staring. Finally, she said, are they your kids? I said, yes, ma'am, I have really recessive genes. What? Are they African American? No, they're Australian American. What? Are your kids mixed? They're fully human. Let's go to the next slide. I firmly believe, right here, today's church have a tremendous mission opportunity before them, the mission to help children in foster care. That's why I wrote the book, The Church and Foster Care. I firmly believe the next great mission field for today's people of faith is the foster care ministry. I spent many summers in Mexico doing mission work. My children have been to Honduras and Nicaragua. Life-changing, to be sure. But when we have, next slide here, when we have this right here, 5 million children experiencing or witnessing domestic violence in their home every single year, when we have 800,000 children missing in our nation, and we have roughly 300,000 children victims of human trafficking, we have roughly 450,000 children in foster care, that means the mission field is in every single community, and for sometimes it's within our own family. Go back to human trafficking. I call human trafficking America's ugly secret. It makes us feel uncomfortable. We don't want to talk about it, so we push it aside and focus on other issues as well. That's kind of like foster care as well. Again, before I was a foster parent, I believed the myths and misconceptions associated with foster care. Next slide here. So yes, I mentioned 5 million children in our nation that experience domestic violence in their home every single year. That was a big concern of mine in April of 2020 when I was being interviewed by CNN. And I said, they said, Dr. John, how is this going to affect foster care? And I said, well, I'm far more concerned about the mental health aspects and abuse aspects than I am of any virus. When we're locking these children at home with their abusers, they're not going to school to get a mandated reporter to visit them. School might be their only safe space. School is the only place they can go without being abused verbally, physically, or sexually. So we are in a pandemic right now of child abuse. Next slide here. Abandonment. We had a phone call one day. We had this unwritten rule as foster parents that we were not going to take any children older than our biological children. But when you become a foster parent, sometimes the rules go out the window. So we had a phone call for a 13-year-old boy, and my oldest child at the time was 11. And so as a foster parent, I have to recognize pretty quickly if my house is the best placement for this child, if I can provide the best resources and support services this child needs, if my family is a good fit for this child, and if this child's a good fit for my family. And sometimes as foster parents, sometimes we need to say no. Because sometimes we might not be the best family, the best fit. Sometimes we might not be able to provide the best resources or support services. I tell foster parents, saying no does not mean no to every child. With 450,000 kids in foster care, there's probably going to be another phone call and probably a better fit for your family coming soon. So I asked questions, and this was his story. So it was his birthday. and he's driving along in Atlanta with his mother, the busiest part of Atlanta, Georgia, where I-25 or I-20 and I-75 meet. The mother pulled over the side of the road underneath an underpass and said to her son on his birthday, "Go ahead, get your presents out of the trunk. We'll celebrate your birthday right now." He got out of the car, closed his door, and what did mom do? Took off on his birthday. Abandoned him on the side of the road on his birthday. Can you imagine? So when he came to my house, he's old enough to recognize that he's been abandoned. He's old enough to recognize that he is now a foster kid, a label that nobody wants. He's embarrassed. He's humiliated. He's confused. He's afraid. He's scared. I remember it was 2:30 in the morning. I could hear him trying to stop crying in his pillow. So I said to my wife, "We got to do something." So I got up that night, 2:30 in the morning, and I drove to our nearest Walmart an hour away, and next morning we had a huge birthday for him. So many of these children are abandoned, looking for someplace. Next slide. Neglect, children coming into foster care for neglect. We had a 4-year-old boy come in our house, and he knew 2 words: me hungry. Me hungry, me hungry, me hungry. It's all he would say. He had no teeth. All of his teeth were rotted out because when he came to our house at 4 years of age, he was on a bottle of Diet Coke. He would eat so much, vomit, and eat his vomit. I'm telling you this right after lunch. I'm so sorry. Next slide. Of course, the opioid crisis. I was talking to some people at lunch today. We have fentanyl flooding our borders. We have meth flooding our nation. So where do these children go? When their parents are incarcerated due to their opiate epidemic, or opiate addictions, where do they go? When the parents are incarcerated or hospitalized, or they even die, where do they go? They're flooding into a foster care system that, quite frankly, is struggling to take all these children because there's not enough foster parents. Next slide, please. Child sex trafficking, again, I call it America's ugly secret. We don't want to address it. It makes us feel uncomfortable. I live an hour from Atlanta, Georgia, which is the hub of child sex trafficking in our nation. I told you 2 of the 3 I've adopted are 3rd generation, and their birth mother was prostituted out by age 9. It happens here in Hurricane, West Virginia. It happens in every single community. And if you choose not to believe that or accept that, you're fooling only yourself. Because as I'm talking to you right now, there's a child miles from here who's probably being abused sexually. Right this very moment at 12:47. Next slide, please. It happens in every single community. I think of Helena. Helena was 9 when her parents were killed in Romania, so a family from Pennsylvania adopted her overseas and said, "We'll teach you English, we'll be your forever family, we will love you unconditionally." And for 6 months, she was a victim of child sex trafficking. And then they did something I did not know you could do at the time. They gave her back. They unadopted her. I did not know you could do that at the time. Well, a family from New York said, "Well, we'll teach you English, we'll be your forever family, we will love you unconditionally." And for 1 year, child sex trafficking. And then they gave her back. A third family, when she's 11 years of age at this time, in Georgia, 25 minutes from my hometown, said, "Well, we will be your forever family. We will finish teaching you English. We will love you unconditionally." This is really her 4th family because her first family died in Romania. And for 6 years, she was a victim of sexual, physical, emotional, verbal abuse. And then when she was 17 years of age, her adopted mother of 6 years, driving her to school one day, instead went to child welfare, dragged her kicking and screaming out of the car and said, "You're no longer part of our family." And then she came to live with me. And you can imagine the issues of trust and attachment that she had. Huge issues. She was actually our second failed adoption. We tried adopting her. What was I thinking? What was I thinking at the time? We're in the process of adopting my daughter, Grace. I said to my wife, what will this 17-year-old girl do when she transitions out of the system? Because 55% will drop out of school nationwide, 65% will end up incarcerated, 75% end up homeless, and then the cycle repeats itself for the next generation. So I said, well, where will she go? On Thanksgiving or Christmas? Who will change her flat tire on a rainy Sunday night? Who will bring her chicken soup? Well, My wife's a doctor of nutrition, so it probably wouldn't be chicken soup, but it'd probably be something a little healthier than that. We'll do that. We need to adopt her. That was the worst thing I could have asked her, because to her, adoption meant abandonment, sex trafficking, rape. She sabotaged adoption, as she should have, and then it steadily grew worse after that. Now I'm happy to tell you that she's 32 years of age. She is a child welfare worker. She has 2 healthy children that my wife and I are grandparents to. Married to a lovely man, by the way. So if my wife's grandma name is Lolly, what does that make me? Yes, lollipop. Thank you so much. All right. It's happening in every single community. Next slide, please. This is the verse that strikes me. Matthew 25:35. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I need clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, you looked after me. I was in prison, you came to visit me. That is the children in our nation. That is the children in our nation. God is speaking to us. There's such a need. Next slide, please. This is National Foster Parenting Month, National Foster Care Awareness Month. Foster parenting, to me, has been by far the hardest thing I have ever done. Foster parenting, to me, has been by far the most rewarding thing I have ever done. I never planned this path. It's interesting, God's path takes us. But there's such a need for foster parents. Today's caseworkers are overworked, overwhelmed, under-resourced, under-supported, understaffed, and underpaid. Or tell me if I'm wrong, caseworkers. So overwhelmed with work to do. Not enough foster parents. The state of Georgia right now, like many states, is facing an issue called hoteling. They don't have any place for these children to go. Let's look at our next slide, please. So this is why I think this is the church's next mission field. When I wrote the book Faith in Foster Care, which is so generous of you to offer out there for free out there, I was starting to see, back in 2013, I think I started writing that book, starting to see, I thought, an awakening in our churches and our nation, where they're starting to recognize, hey, there's children in our community that we can help, and maybe we can help foster parents. So how can we do this? How can churches today help children in foster care? Well, to begin with, let's go to this next slide here. Actually, go to the next one after that, please, if you would. To begin with, there's so many ways. You can create your own clothes closet. So as many of you know, when children are placed in foster care, many times they come with just their clothes in their back or belongings in a black plastic bag. I think back to the time where I got a phone call, and I asked, okay, how old is the child? He's 13. Why is he in care? Et cetera, et cetera. So I said, okay, well, let me discuss it with my family. I'll call you back, told the caseworker. So I talked about it with my family. My kids knew the 13-year-old boy, big troublemaker in school, academically brilliant, behavior a mess. I called the caseworker back up and said, sure, we'll take him. If you take one, will you take two? Oh, okay. Let me call you back. So I talked about my family. Sure, we'll take two. Called back. Great, Dr. John, thank you so much. If you take two, we take three. How many are there? There's 5. 5? Why don't you tell me that to begin with? Well, we thought you might say no right away. Oh. When they came to our house, so they lived in a house, no plumbing, no toilet, no heat, no air, no electricity, no food, no running water. You could not see the floor in the house. It was covered in human dog feces. You could not place your hand on the counter covered in human dog feces. When they came to our house, their clothes are stapled together, and we had to burn their clothing because the clothing was contaminated with meth, which mom was running a meth lab with her 2 teenage boyfriends, and human dog feces. So many times these kids come to our house with just the clothes in their back. So one of the ways many churches across the country are opening up their own clothes closets. Wonderful mission field, if you will. Mentors. We can be mentors for these children. Kids in foster care are, at least on average, 18 months behind academically. They struggle with reading and math skills. My doctoral dissertation was, at the time I was a teacher, and before I became a foster parent, I had no clue. After I became a foster parent, I started recognizing, hey, my fellow teachers have no idea what's going on. There's no sort of training whatsoever for teachers. So I thought, how can we bring caseworkers, foster parents, and teachers together to help them from slipping through the cracks? But these children need more. They need somebody to sit down there and help them with school. All three have adopted fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, reactive attachment disorder, dissociative social engagement disorder. They're all struggling with school. They need mentors. Small businesses. So I told you earlier the statistics are pretty grim when they age out of the system. 55% will end up homeless. Quit school. And we know in today's society, in 2023, without at least a high school diploma or GED, it's going to be pretty difficult out there. So if you own your own small business, you could hire some of these youth, teach them some important living skills, some important work skills. We had a 17-year-old boy come to our house. It was after our fourth failed adoption. They had 4 failed adoptions. After our fourth failed adoption, and I came home 3 weeks later, and my wife was in the bathroom floor just crying. I can't do this again. She said, I can't do this again. And she'd been saying that for years. She doesn't say, I can't do this again when a child leaves because it's so hard. She says it because her heart breaks so much. Because again, it's like losing a child. I tell foster parents often when I travel the nation that foster parents' hearts are a lot like a quilt with all these patches put over it. And I thought to myself, okay, maybe this is it. Maybe this is it. Later that afternoon, I got a call from the sheriff's department, who's a good friend of mine. And he said, listen, I got this 17-year-old boy, and he's been in jail for 5 days. He has no place to go. I said, tell me a little bit about him. Well, he had been bouncing from home to home to home to home to home with mother and her various boyfriends. This newest boyfriend of 1 month said to mom, make a choice, your son or me. An hour later, she had the suitcase packed, and he was abandoned on the side of the road. He ended up in jail. The sheriff said, no one's coming to visit him. No one's calling him. He shouldn't be here. We can't keep him here. Will you take him? And I said to him, well, I really think our fostering journey's over. He said, well, talk about it with your wife. I said, I will, but I think the answer is no. So I talked about it with my wife. I put my head in that pillow that night, and I thought, that's it. No more. The next morning, my wife shook me. She was shaking me. What she should have been saying was, I know you understand this and appreciate this. She should have said to me, I am married to the most handsome man in the world. She did not say that. She said to me, we have no choice. We have to get him. He was on 9 psychotropics drugs when we got him, because these kids, when they go from home to home to home, many times they're on more and more and more drugs. My wife, the doctor of nutrition, was able to get him off down to 1 drug. It was like watching a butterfly emerge from cocoon. All of a sudden, he had choices before him. He saw a future. We started talking about life after high school. Will it be the military? Will it be college? Will it be technical school? What is it going to be? He's seeing all these options. When I tell you, when he came to us at 17 years of age, he did not know how to put deodorant on. He did not know how to brush his teeth. He did not know how to comb his hair. Teaching him all these skills. My adult children, my teenage kids in the house are saying, Dad, this kid's driving us crazy. I understand that. He wanted to try out for the basketball team at the high school. I said, have you ever played basketball? No, but I'm good. Okay, well, let's go play. My 2-year-old could dribble better than he could. I was driving him to the physical in the morning to get the physical. And he knows I'm a college basketball junkie. I love March Madness. Oh, I love it. And he said, I think when I get out of high school, I'm going to go play for Duke. I said, that's not going to happen. But Dr. John, you said with God all things are possible. I did. That one's not. Tried out for the team, got cut. Next day he said, I'm going to wrestle. I said, no. Because I knew the wrestling coach would take anybody. They're desperate for wrestlers. They're going to take anybody. So he's on the team automatically. I said, if you go join the team, we're going to talk about commitment. There's no quitting. We're going to follow this through. You're making a commitment to a team. First day he came home, I want to quit. Nope, not going to do that. A few weeks later, I go watch the meet, and he's practicing. He calls the principal over to the high school, who was a good friend of mine. She was maybe 5'1", maybe 98 pounds. Tough as nails, though. He's calling over, come over, let me show you something. And before I knew it, he picked her up and he body slammed her on the ground. What are you doing? I'm showing her my wrestling moves. Oh my gosh. But one of the things we're able to do with him, though, was we were able to get him connected to a small business in our town and taught him so many important skills. Now he's at an agricultural college in Georgia. Backpacks. I love the backpack program. So many churches have backpack programs. Backpack filled with school supplies. Backpacks filled with hygiene items. Maybe the church you are associated with could create their own backpack ministry, if you will. Let's go to the next slide, please. I told you a little bit about aging out, the statistics on aging out. Perhaps your church could involve these children and teach them these important living skills, social skills, cooking skills. Maybe you could have cooking classes for the teenagers in your church to teach them some important cooking skills. Adoption. Lynn touched earlier about the need for adoption. Can you imagine if every church in our nation adopted a child? There would be no problem anymore. Adoption to me has made my life so much richer. Respite care. Respite care is a program in foster care that is so often underused, underutilized, and many foster parents feel a little bit guilty about using it. It's a program where, so if I have to go out of town, or my family has to go out of town for maybe a wedding or a funeral or a vacation plan long in advance, and we can't bring the children with us for whatever reason. For example, we wanted to bring some of our kids to Disney World. And by the way, when you take 9 children to Disney World, the only thing you do as a father is this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, the entire time. But respite care is a program where the children go to another foster home for a brief time, maybe a weekend, maybe a week, whatever it might be. Gives the foster parents an opportunity to do this. Maybe spend some time with their family, time with their spouse, attend to some things they want to do. It gives the children an opportunity to experience another loving family, another stable family, another family that's going to support them and build relationships with. And it gives those people who can't be full-time foster parents the opportunity to care for children. I hear so many times, Dr. John, I can't do this full-time, but I'd love to maybe do it for a weekend or two. Respite care is a wonderful opportunity. Maybe your church could set up a respite care program. I mentioned earlier about the black plastic bags. These children come to our home so many times, their belongings in a black plastic bag, which to them might be a source of identity. I am worth this. Trash. I started up at our church years ago a program where any child in our community that's leaving a foster care home for whatever reason is going to get a brand new suitcase from our church. So our church donates brand new suitcases to every child in our community. Maybe your church could do that. Let's look at this next slide here. Foster Parent Associations. The very first thing my caseworker did for me and my wife when we finished our training 20 plus years ago was get us associated with a Foster Parent Association. And we actually have a meeting at our church once every month. So our church opens up its doors for a foster parent support group. And let me tell you, foster parenting is a very unique lifestyle. I will never, 60 plus kids in my home, I will never understand truly what it's like being in care. I've had so many kids, I've adopted them. Last Christmas, we had 22 children in our house from foster care came to visit us, but I'll never truly understand their lifestyle. At the same time, my friends, my family members, those closest to me will never truly understand what I do as a foster parent, what it's like having children in your house 24 hours a day who have issues of trust, anger management, attachment, whatever it might be. Foster parents need a sense of connection. They need support. They need to sit down with somebody and say, this is hard, I understand. I've been there, done that. To hold hands, to cry with each other, to laugh at the ridiculousness that comes along with foster parenting, to be a support group. So my church has that. The third Thursday of every month, church opens up its doors. There is child care. Church provides a meal. There's usually a paid speaker. It's kind of like going on a date for foster parents. The only thing I tell foster parents is don't do this. I was in Iowa speaking at an event, and I called my wife up later that night. She said, "Yeah, we voted for the new officers. You're the president." Oh, okay. So don't miss your meetings if you're going to one. Safe havens. I love the Safe Haven program. Many churches are starting to do this. My church does it as well. Safe Haven is an opportunity for the birth parents and the children to meet in a neutral environment. So many times, the birth parents will have a visitation at a child welfare office. And for those birth parents, that might be a place of they feel being judged. They feel resentment. They might feel anger. They might feel mistrust. They might feel they're under the microscope. So many churches now are opening up their own facilities for visitations. This is how it might look. This is how it looks at my church. Every other Saturday, I, as a foster parent, will drop off my child, my kids I'm caring for, at the church, hour and a half, 2 hours. Birth parents will come. It's monitored and supervised by a church volunteer who's been trained to do so. The church is able to offer an environment that is a warm, neutral location. It is not a child welfare office. The foster parents are able to have some time off. The birth parents and the child can meet together in an environment where they're not feeling judged, and perhaps the church could minister to those birth parents in some way, even if it's unspoken. I came to the understanding years ago that these birth parents, despite the heinous crimes they might do, they're still children of God. God loves them just as much as he loves me. My sins are no smaller than theirs. Look at the speck in my own eye. Look at the plank in my own eye sometimes. I love the Safe Haven programs. And of course, we can pray. We can pray for the birth parents. We can pray for the foster parents. We can pray for the children. We can pray for the caseworkers. We can pray for legislation. We can pray for aging out. There's so many areas. In fact, in the book Faith in Foster Care, there's a number of ways that we can pray for the foster care system in general. Let's go to this next slide. We talked about this earlier, James 1:27, to look after orphans and widows in their distress and to keep oneself from being polluted by the world. This is calling us. But let me share you a story, though. This next slide, Sydney. So I got a phone call on a Thursday. Now, let me back up a minute. My wife left on Tuesday to go to Australia to see her family. At the time, she took our two daughters who were in school. I'm sorry, that's not true. She took with her our son who was not in school. My two girls were in school. This was our second placement. And she left on a Tuesday for 3 weeks. By the way, sir, when your mother-in-law lives in Australia and you have 6 children, plus it's your wife and you, 8 people, at $2,000 a ticket, that means it's $16,000 just to see your mother-in-law. Do you feel my pain? Okay, you pray for me? Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Got a phone call on a Thursday. Dr. John, got a girl, will you take care of her? Okay, how old is she? She's 7. Why is she in care? Well, her father's a registered sexual predator, can't find them. Mother's a drug addict, can't find mom anywhere. She's living with grandmother. Grandmother's a severe alcoholic. Grandmother's either drunk in the bed or on couch. The girl is responsible for getting herself fed and clothed to school. Meals consist of frozen hot dogs in the microwave. She goes to school 50% of the time. Okay, how long will she be with us for? Just for the weekend. No, you are laughing already. Sounds like you've been there, done that. I said, well, let me call my wife up because I got to ask my wife's permission. Because if I did not ask my wife's permission, I would not be here, would I? No. So my wife said, you think you got this? Yeah, I got this. No worries. It's just for the weekend. We can do this. Next day is Friday. I call my girls together and say, girls, remember how it was with the previous placement? Remember how scared she was? Those girls, how scared they were, how confused they were? It's going to be like this too. Okay, Daddy. Go down, the car pulls up. We go down to the car. Girls, remember she's going to be scared. Okay, Daddy. Open the car door up. I said, hello. She said, Daddy. I said, oh. She said, I love you. I said, I love you too. Are you my new sisters? I love you. I love you. My girls looked at me. I said, I have no idea what's going on. 3 weeks later, I go pick up my wife from Australia. She had a long flight. It was about 40 some hours. She had a couple delays. It's 2 o'clock in the morning. She's like this. My son's like this. My wife said, let's just go home. I said, okay. All of a sudden she hears, Mommy, I love you, zoom. She looks down like this. She looked at me. I said, it was a long weekend. Sydney had reactive attachment disorder. She had anger management. She lied like no tomorrow. She had eating disorders. She couldn't even read or write her own name. It did not matter. This was my child. I loved her with all of my heart. We're in the process of adopting Sydney. And it was almost 2 years into the placement. Adoption's going well. Got a phone call December 22nd. Dr. John, Sydney's going to go live with her aunt and uncle in Florida, whom she met once when she was born. I said, but we're in the process of adopting her. Judge says she's going to reunification with her aunt and uncle. I said, but we're the only family she's ever known. Doesn't matter, judge says, aunt and uncle. I said, when? Tomorrow. Tomorrow? You're giving me 1 day notice? Before Christmas? I said, can we at least wait until after Christmas? Can you imagine being 9 years of age and 2 days before Christmas being placed into a family you've never known before on Christmas Day? I said, can she at least wake up Christmas morning with a family she's known for 2 years? All the presents we've got her. We make holidays huge in our house for the kids in foster care. Judge says, no, she's got to go tomorrow. I said, I will wake up Christmas morning. We'll spend Christmas morning with her. I will drive the 6 hours to Florida myself Christmas Day. Let her wake up with the family she knows Christmas Day. No. December 23rd, I am in shock. The first stage of grief and Kubler-Ross's grief and loss. I go to the Child Welfare Agency, give the aunt and uncle all the presents. I look at the aunt and uncle. I know this is wrong of me. I get it. This is wrong. But I thought, this does not look right. I understand. Look at the plank in my own eye. Judgment. I suspected something was wrong. I gave Sydney an 8x10 picture of our family with our names, address, phone number in the back, which I could do to every child. And I said, Sydney, I love you. Goodbye. And 2 days later, Christmas Day, my wife and I cried. 5 years later, I get a phone call. I'm actually an hour away from getting on the plane to go see my mother-in-law in Australia. I got to see her sometime, right? Okay, all right. And a voice I'd not heard in 5 years said, Daddy. I said, Sydney? Daddy, I want to come home. Where are you? Where are you? Please let me come home. Sydney, is this you? And she started crying. Please let me come home, Daddy. Please let me come home. I said, Sydney, where are you? Where are you? She couldn't speak. I said, let me talk to somebody. So she put me on the phone to her foster mother in Alabama. You see, her aunt and uncle's son in Florida had been raping her over and over again. They knew about it, but they did not want to get caught. So they drove to the nearest state park in Alabama and left her there. And the only thing she had besides her clothes was what? The 8x10 frame picture of us. And she'd been going from home to home to home. And she asked this new foster parent if she could call us. I said, listen, I'm going to Australia for 3 weeks, but when I come back, we'll go visit her. We'll start the adoption process again, whatever it might be. The mother said, she's tough. I said, I'm sure she is. 3 weeks later, I come back from Australia. I run in the house, don't even unpack. Get on the phone. She'd been moved someplace else. They did not know. I spent the next 5 years looking for Sydney. Phone calls, emails, letters, visiting people in Florida, Georgia, Alabama. I don't know where she's at, but I needed her to hear 3 things before she transitioned out of the system, before she became one of those statistics, that she's cared for, she has family, and she is loved unconditionally. And then I got a text on my phone one day from the president of the Alabama Foster Parent Association. I thought, it's a speech I'm going to give at their conference. So call this number. I called. I said, who is this? This is so-and-so, Director of Child Welfare of the state of Alabama. Do you know why I called? She said, yes, we've been waiting for you to call. I felt it. Oh, no. And then I could tell. I said, do you know where she is? Yes. And I lost it. I couldn't stop crying. Since I became a foster parent, I am such an emotional cripple. My wife knows not to take me to any movie that has Nicholas Sparks attached to it because I'm doomed. Credits come up, I'm in tears. I'm writing a new book right now with Jen Lilly, who's a Hallmark movie actress, foster care advocate. She says, I'll read your books when you watch my movies, but they make me cry. So we went to visit Sydney in a mental health hospital where she was 18 years of age. No one called her. No one wrote her letters. No one visited her. In her mind, we kicked her out of the house Christmas Day. In her mind, when she called 5 years later to come get her, we didn't. We thought about adopting her, but the child welfare supporter, her therapist, and counselor all said she's a danger to small children. And the 3 children I adopted, I recognized this would place my house into turmoil, maybe even danger to my entire family. Sydney is now 24 years of age. She's not past 9th grade. She has 2 children. She's homeless. The foster care system in America failed my Sydney. I will not let it happen to the child. It's happening to children here in this community. We have an obligation, we have a call by God to care for His children in crisis. As I said to you earlier, it's happening right where we live. There's a child right now in this county who is hoping, maybe even praying, somebody, please help me. That is today's mission field. This next slide, please. I'm so grateful you had the opportunity to get the book Faith in Foster Care. The book, The Church in Foster Care, out there, I think is a great resource for churches to create their own foster care ministry or outreach program and fostering love as well. And I'll put this next slide before I go. Please feel free to contact me if I can be of any help to your churches, to your social welfare workers, caseworkers, foster parents in any way. I'm here to serve you. Thank you so very much.